The Curse of Ashford Manor. Ashford Manor had always been a place of whispered legends and dark rumors. Nestled on a cliff overlooking the stormy sea, it had stood for over 2 centuries, a symbol of grandeur and mystery. The once magnificent estate had long since fallen into disrepair, its windows darkened and its walls cracked, as if the house itself had suffered under the weight of its tragic history. No one in the nearby town dared to approach it, especially after nightfall. The manor had been empty for decades, ever since the last of the Ashford family disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some said they had fled from a curse that had plagued their lineage for generations. Others believed they had been taken by something far more sinister. But to Sarah, the rumors were nothing more than ghost stories, tales spun to frighten children. Sarah had always been a skeptic. An aspiring journalist, she was determined to uncover the truth behind the legends of Ashford Manor. She saw it as the perfect opportunity to launch her career, a story no one else dared to pursue. Armed with her camera, a flashlight, and a notebook, she decided to spend a weekend at the manor, determined to prove that the stories were nothing more than superstitious nonsense. She arrived at the manor just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grounds. The sea crashed against the rocks below, the sound echoing up the cliffs like the roar of some ancient beast. The iron gates creaked as she pushed them open, and she made her way up the overgrown path to the front door. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay. As Sarah stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The interior was as decayed as the outside, dust-covered furniture draped in white sheets, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, and faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors staring down at her from the walls. But it was the silence that unnerved her the most. It was too quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Determined not to let the eerie atmosphere get to her, Sarah began exploring the manor, taking pictures and jotting down notes. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she wandered through the grand hall, the library, the dining room, all filled with the remnants of a life long gone. It wasn't until she reached the second floor that she felt something was truly off. She had been standing in front of a large ornate mirror at the end of the hallway, studying her reflection when she noticed it. The figure standing behind her. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but as she turned to look, the figure was gone. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She told herself it was just her imagination, nothing more. But as the evening wore on, the strange occurrences began to multiply. Doors creaked open on their own, shadows shifted in the corners of her vision, and the once silent house was now filled with the faint sound of whispering voices. The whispers grew louder as the night deepened, filling the manor with a chorus of unintelligible words. Sarah tried to rationalize it. Old houses made noises, drafts caused doors to move, and her mind was playing tricks on her. But deep down, a sense of dread began to take root. Something was wrong. This house was not as empty as she had thought. Around midnight, Sarah decided to settle in the drawing room, where she set up her equipment to record any unusual activity. She sat in the dim light, trying to stay awake, but exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. Just as she was about to doze off, she heard it, the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. She bolted upright, her heart racing. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was approaching. She grabbed her flashlight and swung it towards the doorway, but there was nothing there. The footsteps stopped just outside the room, but the feeling of being watched remained, a palpable presence in the air. Gathering her courage, Sarah stepped into the hallway, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The hallway was empty, but she could feel it, the oppressive sensation that she was not alone. She called out, her voice trembling slightly, but there was no response, only the distant sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs. She decided to head back to the drawing room when she noticed something strange. a door at the end of the hall that she hadn't seen before. It was slightly ajar, and a dim light flickered from within. Curiosity getting the better of her, Sarah approached the door, her hand trembling as she pushed it open. The room beyond was small and musty, filled with old furniture covered in dust. But what caught Sarah's attention was the large, circular bed in the center of the room, draped in crimson velvet. On the bed lay a figure, unmoving, covered by a thin, tattered sheet. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was looking at. A body, long dead, its features obscured by decay. The stench hit her all at once, the sickly sweet smell of rot that had been masked by the musty air. But it wasn't the corpse that terrified her. It was the realization that the body was not alone. Standing at the foot of the bed, almost invisible in the shadows, was a tall, thin figure. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, its eyes sunken deep into its skull, glowing with a faint, unnatural light. It watched Sarah with an intensity that made her blood run cold. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move, paralyzed by fear. The figure stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate, its eyes never leaving hers. It opened its mouth, and the whispers that had filled the house all night suddenly became clear, a cacophony of voices speaking in unison.
"Leave, wretch, leave."
The force of the voices broke Sarah's paralysis, and she stumbled backward, tripping over her own feet. The figure advanced, its face twisted into a grotesque grin, its eyes glowing brighter. She scrambled to her feet and ran, her footsteps echoing through the hall as she fled down the stairs. The house was alive with noise now, the walls groaning, the whispers turning into wails. As Sarah reached the front door, she yanked it open, only to find it led not outside, but back into the house. She tried another door, then another, but each one led to the same room, the same place she was trying to escape. Panicking, she ran through the house, desperately searching for a way out, but every door, every window led back to the same room, to that cursed bed with the corpse and the figure watching her, always watching. Finally, exhausted and terrified beyond reason, Sarah collapsed in the grand hall, her body shaking with sobs. The whispers closed in around her, the figure's presence pressing down on her like a weight. She could feel it behind her, its cold breath on her neck.
"You should have listened. You should have left."
The last thing Sarah saw before everything went black was the face of the figure, inches from hers, its grin wide and unnatural. When the townspeople found Sarah's car parked outside Ashford Manor the next morning, they hesitated before approaching. No one dared to enter the house, not after what had happened to the Ashford family. But they had to know. Inside, they found her equipment, her notes, and her camera, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. The only trace of her was a faint trail of footprints leading from the front door to the drawing room, and then to the mysterious room at the end of the hall, a room that, when they opened the door, was empty. All except for the bed in the center, where a body lay covered in a sheet, long dead. And on the wall above the bed, scrawled in blood, were the words, "The house keeps what it takes." Sarah was never seen again, and Ashford Manor remains empty to this day. But if you stand outside on a quiet night, some say you can still hear the whispers in the wind.
Stay away. Never enter the house that keeps its secrets and its victims forever.